to which the powers of DOJ are being abused to go after the president's enemies. I approach this hearing with a heavy heart. As a former federal prosecutor myself, I served in a department that, whether it was under a Democratic or Republican president, would never use the office to go after the president's enemies or to hide the corruption of his friends. But today, the Justice Department has been used to cover up the possible corruption of the mayor of New York or of a high-level administration official taking $50,000 reportedly in cash in a bag, or a child sex predator who befriended the president and some of his cabinet members. And instead of preventing partisan weaponization, your department has engaged in a brazenly political prosecution at the president's explicit direction. The department has become President Trump's personal sword and shield to go after his ever-growing list of political enemies and to protect himself, his allies, and associates. My questions therefore focus on these two themes: hiding the corrupt acts of his friends and prioritizing the political prosecution of his enemies. So let me start with the shocking allegations of bribery and pay to play. 2 weeks ago, 4 major media outlets reported that Tom Homan, the president's top deportation official working in the White House, took $50,000 in cash in a bag from undercover FBI agents in September 2024, just over a year ago. According to these reports, Homan indicated he would facilitate securing contracts in exchange for money once he was in office in a future Trump administration. Reportedly, this exchange was caught on tape. Rather than pursue this investigation without fear or favor, the department and the FBI under your leadership or that of your predecessor before you confirmed quietly shut it down. Once news broke, your deputy and FBI director issued a joint public statement confirming that the Trump administration closed the investigation. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied Homan took the $50,000, telling a reporter, quote, "Mr. Homan never took the $50,000 that you're referring to, so you should get your facts straight." So today I hope you can help us get our facts straight. Was that true, what the White House press secretary said when she denied Homan took the money? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, as I stated earlier, I was not in office. I was not confirmed when that was handled.
So does that mean
Deputy Attorney General Blanche and Director Patel said that there was no evidence that Tom Homan committed a crime. Yet now you're putting his picture up to slander him.
No, I'm putting his picture up showing an interview he gave with, I think, Fox, in which he was asked explicitly about these allegations that he took a $50,000 bribe, and he refused to answer. He said he didn't answer the question whether he took the money, so I'm asking you the question. Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, I answered that question multiple times. And frankly, you know.
Well, I don't think, with respect, I don't think you did. But in case I just didn't hear you, what is the answer? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, that happened prior to my confirmation as Attorney General.
Do you know,
I said that.
Do you know, sitting here, whether he took the money?
All I know is that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Patel said there was no case. And Caroline Leavitt is one of the most trustworthy human beings I know.
So
and,
was she,
was she
right?
If you worked for me, you would have been fired because you were censured by Congress for lying with your
We can stipulate to, you can stipulate to all your personal attacks on the Democratic members of the committee.
Personal attacks? You've been attacking my FBI director. You've been attacking my office. You've been attacking.
But what we're interested in,
borders are.
What we're interested in is the answer to these oversight questions.
You want your
you were asked by my colleague. You were asked by my colleague.
Attacking good people.
Regular order, Madam Chair, so I can ask a question. You were asked by my colleague from Vermont whether you will support providing a video or audio tape, if it exists, of Mr. Homan taking $50,000 in bribe money from the FBI. Will you support a request by this committee to provide that tape or tapes to the committee? Yes or no?
Senator Schiff, you can talk to Director Patel about that.
Well, I'm talking to you about it. You're the Attorney General. This will be your decision. Will you
You don't have to
support?
tell me what is my decision and
Well,
what is
then-
not
then-
my decision.
then-
I
and you-
said
and
you
you
can
don't
talk
have
to
to-
Director
and you don't have
Patel.
to try to-
You think
you
you've
don't
got a
have to-
gotcha with Tom Homan, our
Excuse me,
border czar,
excuse me, you
who's
don't have-
been out there
excuse me.
fighting for our country
Madam
since
Chair,
Donald Trump took office.
I'm trying to ask you a question. Regular order, please. And you don't have to defer to the FBI director to pass the buck. So I'm asking you, will you support a request so that the committee, or indeed, I believe the American people should be able to see that video or audio tape? Will you support that request?
Will you apologize to Donald Trump
So
for
I
trying
guess,
to
I guess
impeach
the answer
him
is you won't support that
after
request.
you now know that
So
Joe
let me-
Biden tried
let
to
me
cover up
do
Hunter
this.
Biden's involvement with
Excuse me,
Ukraine?
let me do this, because I think it's valuable that the American people get a sense of what you've refused to answer today. So these are just some of the questions you refused to answer, or have answered with personal attacks on members of this committee. You were asked whether you consulted with career ethics lawyers, as you promised you would do during your nomination hearing, when you approved the president receiving a $400 million gift from the Qataris. You refused to answer that question. You were asked who or what role you may have played, or who played the role in asking that Trump's name be flagged in any of the Epstein documents gathered by the FBI. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Homan kept the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Homan paid taxes on the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did career prosecutors find insufficient evidence to charge James Comey? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, how are military strikes on these boats in the Caribbean legal? And you refused to even answer that question.
You
were
have a
asked,
law degree, Senator Schiff?
Excuse me. You were asked, did you discuss indicting James Comey with the president? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did you approve the firing of antitrust lawyers who disagreed with the Hewlett-Packard merger? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you support a restoration fund for violent insurrections to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you were firing career professionals, career prosecutors, just because they worked on January 6th investigations. You refused to answer that question. You were asked by my California colleague whether you believe government officials, like immigration officials, have to abide by court orders. You wouldn't even answer that question. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing.
Oversight?
Excuse me, you can attack me after my time is over.
You've attacked all of us, including President Trump, for your entire
You can attack me later,
career.
and I know you've got plenty of canned attacks. We've heard them all day today.
Canned attacks on you?
This is supposed to be...
No one needs a canned attack on you.
Regular order, Madam Chair, I'm trying to speak. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing of the Justice Department. And it comes in the wake of an indictment called for by the president of one of his enemies. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing, and it comes in the wake of revelations that a top administration official took $50,000 in a bag, and this department made that investigation go away. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing when dozens of prosecutors have been fired simply because they worked on cases investigating the former president. This is, and now
What
the current
about the
president.
fires in California?
And
Do you
this
care
is
about that,
supposed to
Senator
be,
Schiff?
excuse me, this is supposed to be an oversight hearing in which members of Congress can get serious answers to serious questions about
Are the riots in LA serious?
About the cover-up of corruption, about the prosecution of the president's enemies. And
I think you owe the president an apology.
When will it be
Your entire career, frankly.
that the members of this committee on a bipartisan basis demand answers to those questions and refuse to accept
Clearly you're a failed lawyer
refuse
because
to
you don't
accept,
understand when
excuse
someone
me,
can and cannot
refuse
answer
to
a
accept
question.
personal slander as an answer to those questions.
Personal slander?
With
Will
that,
you
Madam
apologize
Chair,
to Donald
I yield
Trump
back.
for slandering him? Personal slander.
Senator
May I ask unanimous consent, Madam Chair, to introduce into the record the statement of 1,000 former Justice Department officials who warned that the Comey indictment is a democracy-threatening abuse of power. May I also request unanimous consent for the introduction into the record of 282 former career officials at the Justice Department raising an alarm who were voluntarily or involuntarily forced to leave the department because of improper actions taken by the Department of Justice. May I introduce, with unanimous consent, the Justice Department manual that talks about when initiating and declining charges are subject to impermissible considerations. And finally, Madam Chair, may I introduce the letter for Michael Ben-Ari, a career counterterrorism prosecutor, DOJ, a letter he nailed to his door, which concludes.
He pointed to hundreds of career prosecutors who had reportedly quit, saying they faced pressure to take actions that clashed with ethical standards or feared they might have to in the future. Over 1,000 former federal prosecutors had already raised alarms about unprecedented abuse of power aimed at the president's political opponents. Schiff, a former prosecutor himself, spoke with a heavy tone, contrasting this with how the department used to operate under both parties, focusing on facts and law rather than personal vendettas. He described the DOJ as becoming a tool to protect friends and pursue enemies, zeroing in on two main themes: covering up potential corruption among allies and launching selective prosecutions. One of the biggest flashpoints centered on Tom Homan, the president's top deportation official. Reports from major outlets detailed how undercover FBI agents, posing as businessmen, approached Homan back in September 2024. According to those accounts, Homan accepted $50,000 in cash stuffed into a bag during a meeting in Texas, hinting he could help secure government contracts once in a future Trump administration. The exchange was reportedly captured on tape, complete with audio and video evidence. Yet when the story broke, the Trump-era DOJ and FBI quietly closed the investigation. White House officials pushed back strongly, with the press secretary insisting Homan never took the money and urging reporters to check their facts. Schiff pressed Bondi directly on this. He asked whether the White House statement was accurate and if Homan had indeed taken the cash. Bondi responded that she wasn't confirmed in office when the matter was handled and pointed to statements from her deputy and the FBI director saying there was no evidence of a crime. Schiff displayed images and kept returning to the question, wanting clarity on whether Homan kept the money or reported it for taxes. Bondi stood firm, noting the case predated her tenure and accusing Schiff of slandering good people who were fighting for the country. The back and forth grew intense, with Schiff asking if she would support releasing any existing tapes to the committee or the public. Bondi deferred to the FBI director, leading Schiff to accuse her of passing the buck on oversight responsibilities. This wasn't an isolated issue. Schiff moved through a detailed list of other questions Bondi had reportedly refused to answer fully during the hearing. He brought up whether she had consulted career ethics lawyers, as promised in her confirmation, before approving the president receiving a massive $400 million luxury jet gift from the Qataris. The deal involved a high-end plane intended for temporary use as Air Force One before transfer to a presidential library foundation. Critics raised immediate red flags about potential conflicts, especially given Bondi's prior lobbying work connected to Qatar. Bondi declined to dive into specifics on the ethics review, which only added fuel to speculation about transparency at the top. The Epstein documents also took center stage. Schiff questioned Bondi's role or any involvement in flagging mentions of the president's name within the vast FBI files gathered on the disgraced financier. Reports had surfaced about agents being instructed to highlight references to Trump during reviews, with partial releases and delays drawing scrutiny. Bondi's department had informed the president that his name appeared multiple times in the materials, though officials emphasized it didn't indicate wrongdoing. Still, the handling sparked rumors of selective redactions and protection for high-profile associates. Schiff wanted straight answers on what part, if any, Bondi or others played in those decisions, but she refused to engage deeply, framing it as prior matters or outside her direct scope. Beyond that, the senator highlighted additional refusals. Questions about whether career prosecutors found insufficient evidence to charge former FBI Director James Comey went unanswered. So did inquiries into discussions about indicting Comey or approving the firing of antitrust lawyers who opposed a major merger settlement involving Hewlett-Packard and Juniper Networks. Bondi faced probes on military strikes in the Caribbean, support for restoration funds related to certain protests, and whether immigration officials must follow court orders. Each time, according to Schiff's recap, responses either deflected or turned personal. He noted dozens of prosecutors reportedly let go simply for prior work on cases involving the former president, painting a picture of a department reshaped by loyalty tests rather than merit. Bondi didn't hold back in her responses. She accused Schiff of personal attacks on her team and good public servants, reminding him of past congressional censures and defending figures like the FBI director. At one point, she directly asked if Schiff would apologize to Donald Trump for what she called slandering efforts. The room grew chaotic with calls for regular order as both sides traded barbs. Bondi emphasized that Homan had been out fighting for the country since the administration took office, rejecting any notion of wrongdoing. She pushed back on claims of a politicized DOJ, suggesting the real issues lay with previous leadership and attempts to target Trump allies. The broader atmosphere of the hearing reflected ongoing turmoil. Schiff introduced statements into the record from groups of former DOJ officials warning about threats to independence and improper actions. One letter from a career counterterrorism prosecutor highlighted concerns over losing experienced staff, potentially weakening efforts against real national security threats. Bondi and her supporters countered that changes were necessary to root out bias and refocus priorities. As details emerged, online discussions exploded with reactions from both sides. Supporters of the administration viewed Bondi's firmness as standing up to partisan harassment, praising her for not letting the hearing devolve into a one-sided attack. They pointed to what they saw as recycled claims from past investigations that never produced charges against key figures. On the other side, opponents seized on the evasions as evidence of a cover-up culture, calling for more aggressive congressional oversight, potential subpoenas for tapes and memos, and even impeachment discussions in some circles. The Homan case, in particular, lingered as a flashpoint, with lawsuits seeking FOIA releases of any recordings and ethics complaints about financial disclosures. The Qatar jet situation continued to generate buzz well beyond the hearing. A $400 million gift from a foreign government raised classic emoluments questions under the Constitution, requiring congressional consent for such presents. Bondi's involvement, given her background, led to calls for recusal that apparently went unheeded. The approval memo reportedly cleared the way quickly, but transparency remained limited, leaving room for speculation about influence and future dealings. Similar patterns appeared in how sensitive files were managed, with partial drops in protections for certain names, keeping conspiracy theories alive across platforms. Throughout the hearing, Bondi maintained that her department operated with integrity, closing cases based on evidence rather than politics. She highlighted ongoing border security efforts and commitments to public safety as real priorities. Schiff, however, warned that without straight answers, public trust would continue eroding. He stressed the need for bipartisan demands for full disclosure, arguing that oversight exists precisely for moments like these. The clash underscored larger questions about where loyalty to an administration ends and duty to the rule of law begins. What makes this hearing stand out is how it captured the raw emotions and high stakes involved. Personal attacks mixed with policy disagreements created moments that felt more like a courtroom drama than standard proceedings. Bondi's sharp retorts and Schiff's methodical listing of unanswered points kept the energy high, ensuring clips spread rapidly online. For those following government accountability, it raised fresh doubts about whether the DOJ could truly serve as an independent guardian or if it had shifted too far into serving one agenda. As the session wrapped, both sides yielded time amid lingering tension. Schiff's push for records and apologies